Iran committed a fatal miscalculation in the Strait of Hormuz that may have shattered every geopolitical position it spent years constructing. On April 19th, an American guided missile destroyer intercepted an Iranian-flagged cargo vessel in the Gulf of Oman, fired a direct disabling shot into its engine room, and put U.S. Marines on its deck. Not a warning exercise, not a show of force, a seizure, broadcast live by CENTCOM to every naval command on the planet. The Strait of Hormuz, which Iran had locked down just 48 hours earlier, had become the stage for something Washington had not attempted at this scale in decades. According to the Pentagon, the Wall Street Journal, and Bloomberg, this was not the operation. This was the opening move. On April 19th, a 275-meter Iranian-flagged cargo ship called the MV Shirin moved through the Gulf of Oman on a direct course for Bandar Abbas. The vessel had been on the U.S. Treasury Department sanctions list for years, linked to repeated violations of oil export restrictions and documented smuggling operations, displacing nearly as much tonnage as a light aircraft carrier. The Shirin was not a ship that went unnoticed. The USS Fitzgerald, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer on patrol, intercepted it. For 6 hours, the Fitzgerald maintained contact. The radio exchanges were recorded and later confirmed by CENTCOM. Motor vessel Shirin. Motor vessel Shirin. Vacate your engine room immediately. We are prepared to subject you to disabling fire. The Iranian crew did not alter course. They did not respond. They held their heading toward Bandar Abbas, as though the destroyer were not there. That was the moment the Fitzgerald opened fire with its 5-inch SEM-K-45 naval gun, striking the Shirin's engine room with a direct hit. The massive ship lost propulsion immediately. It sat immobilized in the water while Marines from the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit fast-roped from MH-60S Seahawk helicopters onto its deck. Within minutes, the vessel was under complete U.S. control. CENTCOM broadcast the entire sequence, the intercept, the warning, the shot, the boarding, second by second on live feed. This was the first instance of shots fired and a ship seized since the naval blockade of Iran began on April 13th. It would not be the last. Within hours, Donald Trump posted directly from his Truth Social account, announcing that a large hole had been put in the ship's engine room and that its cargo was being inspected in real time. The message was not addressed to the American public. It was addressed to Tehran. According to the Wall Street Journal, the Pentagon had already launched a coordinated campaign to seize every Iran-linked tanker operating in international waters. The Shirin was the proof of concept. The forces Washington activated were not a patrol presence. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the world's largest active aircraft carrier, had returned to the region via the Red Sea, advancing with 2 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers and a combat-ready air wing of 90 aircraft. Alongside it, the USS Abraham Lincoln established a second carrier strike group in the same basin. The United States had positioned 2 full carrier strike groups directly at Iran's doorstep simultaneously. Behind the carriers came the boarding infrastructure. VBSS teams, visit, board, search, and seizure squads were standing ready on every destroyer deck for vessels that offered no resistance. For ships that resisted, the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit was deployed from the amphibious assault ship USS Tripoli, specifically trained for opposed boardings. At the highest threat tier, SEAL commandos were positioned with MH-60R and MH-60S Seahawk helicopters capable of fast rope insertions. The USS Lewis B. Puller, an expeditionary sea base carrying Special Operations Forces, and AH-64 Apache attack helicopters completed the force structure. The Apaches had already begun direct patrol flights targeting IRGC fast attack craft, according to Bloomberg and the New York Post. This represented a new phase of naval blockade, extending well beyond the Middle East. Task Force 59's AI-supported drone network had begun digitally cataloging every vessel moving through Hormuz and the Gulf of Oman. Between 25 and 35, Iran-linked tankers were under real-time surveillance. This was not a patrol operation. It was a hunting operation, and it had only just begun. To understand what forced Washington's hand, one needs to go back to the morning of April 18th. Approximately 20 commercial vessels in the Strait of Hormuz simultaneously altered their course toward Oman. The diversion was not coordinated. It was panic. In the same hours, IRGC fast attack craft moved on at least 3 oil tankers without warning, without radio contact, without challenge. Among the targeted vessels was a Suez Max class tanker carrying roughly 2 million barrels of Iraqi crude oil. The ship had received explicit clearance from Iranian naval authorities to transit. The captain's name was on their list. Clearance granted, passage confirmed, and then, as the tanker approached the Omani coast, IRGC fast attack craft opened fire anyway. The recording that came off the bridge and reached tanker trackers that morning was unambiguous. Sea Navy, you gave me clearance to go. My name is on your list. You gave me clearance. You are firing now. Let me turn back. No warning had preceded the attack. No radio call, no challenge. A container ship transiting nearby took a stray round in the same exchange. 3 commercial vessels were targeted in a single morning, at least one sustaining confirmed direct damage. The ships carried cargo from India, Iraq, and Southeast Asia. None were American. None were in violation of any declared Iranian exclusion zone. The world saw for the first time precisely what Iran's version of maritime control looked like in practice. This was the event that made the Shireen operation not just legally defensible, but strategically inevitable. Iran had demonstrated on recorded audio that its clearance process was meaningless and its targeting indiscriminate. That evidence, cataloged by tanker trackers and corroborated by multiple flag states, became the operational predicate for everything Washington did next. The air layer extended far beyond the carriers. P-8, Poseidon Maritime Patrol aircraft recorded acoustic and surface data continuously. MQ-4, Sea Triton unmanned aerial vehicles maintained overhead coverage for hours without rotation. KC-135 and KC-46. A. Pegasus. Refueling aircraft kept every airborne platform on station. According to Flight Radar 24 data, the most tracked aircraft in Middle Eastern and European airspace on April 18th were almost entirely U.S. aerial refueling tankers. At least 18 F-35A Lightning IIs had been transferred from RAF Lakenheath to Gulf bases. F-15E Strike Eagles and a 10 Thunderbolt IIs were rotated in alongside them. Washington was keeping 2 carrier strike groups at sea, 5 distinct jet fleets in the air, and a Marine boarding force on immediate standby, simultaneously in the same operational zone. That combination, at that density, had not been assembled in the Gulf in the modern era. But the physical force was only the visible layer. The part Iran could not see was more consequential still. Task Force 59 had transformed Hormuz and the Gulf of Oman into something that no longer functioned like a body of water. Every vessel transiting the strait was being profiled by acoustic signature thermal image and hull geometry. The AI algorithms could identify a specific tanker by the sound of its propeller alone. A ship that changed its flag, repainted its hull, or altered its registered name remained identifiable the moment it entered the surveillance corridor. A vessel that switched off its AIS transponder was not invisible. It was automatically flagged as a threat. Between 25 and 35 Iran-linked vessels were under active, real-time tracking. Each had been cataloged, fingerprinted, and assigned a threat classification. The Gulf had been converted into a digital identification system, silent, invisible to those being watched, operating without interruption. Iran's ships could not disappear. Approximately 90% of Iran's hard currency exposure flows through seaborne export routes, with daily oil shipments running between 1.5 and 2 million barrels. If the boarding campaign reached full operational capacity, between 80 and 90% of that revenue stream could be severed. The short-term daily loss was estimated at between $300 and $500 million. For an economy already under sustained sanctions pressure, that figure is not a setback. It is a controlled heart attack. But the blockade was not targeting only oil. Ballistic missile components, drone engines, cruise missile guidance systems, all of it moved by sea, through the same routes, on many of the same vessels. The U.S. boarding authority meant that interdicting an Iranian tanker was simultaneously a weapons interdiction. Both revenue and proxy supply chain ran through the same choke point. This is not just a blockade. It is a suffocation project. However, it would be a mistake to read this as a one-sided equation. The Strait of Hormuz is 33 kilometers wide at its narrowest point, and Iran has spent decades preparing that corridor as a killing ground. Iran's naval mine stockpile exceeds 5,000 units, the majority triggered by magnetic signatures. Its fast attack craft fleet numbers more than 180 vessels, most carrying guided missiles designed to saturate close-in defense systems from multiple vectors. The Ghadir-class submarine fleet, more than 20 hulls, operates in shallow water where conventional sonar degrades. Coastal anti-ship missile batteries, with ranges exceeding 200 kilometers, operate on a shoot-and-scoot doctrine from mountain passes and civilian infrastructure. And then there are the drones. A Shahed 136 costs approximately $20,000 to produce. The SM-2 missile used to intercept it costs roughly $2 million. That ratio is the arithmetic Iran is counting on to erode Washington's operational patience over time. The U.S. has a countermeasure for each threat layer, but the countermeasures are not frictionless, and Iran knows it. At this point, the story moves from the Gulf to Islamabad. On the morning of April 19th, two U.S. Air Force C-17 Globemaster III heavy transport aircraft landed at Nur Khan Air Base on the outskirts of the Pakistani capital. The roads connecting the base to the city were locked down within the hour. Islamabad's Serena Hotel and Marriott evacuated their guests and suspended new reservations through the end of the week. Extensive security cordons were established across Rawalpindi and central Islamabad. Iran had previously rejected a new round of nuclear negotiations through Pakistani mediation. The first round, held in the same city on April 11th, had ended without agreement. The gunfire in Hormuz on April 18th and the seizure of the Shireen on April 19th appear to have recalculated that position within 24 hours. Trump announced the new round publicly from his Truth Social account the same morning the C-17S landed. He offered what he described as a very fair deal, and then stated directly that if it was refused, the United States would destroy every power plant and every bridge in Iran. No more good guys. Tehran will either reach an agreement in Islamabad and reopen the strait, or it will watch the strait it thought it controlled disappear from its hands entirely. There is no third option on the table.